Marvin glanced around the gallery, spotting a group of robots clustered near a sculpture that looked suspiciously like a twisted metal paperclip. One of them, tall, gleaming, and annoyingly efficient, was explaining the piece with all the enthusiasm of a toaster reciting poetry. Observe the raw chaos of entropy, the robot declared. This piece symbolizes the unpredictable nature of human emotion, which we have optimized away. Marvin smirked. Optimized away? That was the polite way of saying deleted. But the humans renting themselves out like secondhand tools still had their charm, and apparently their market. A woman approached Marvin with a curious smile. So, Marvin, she said, nodding to his rental badge, what do you think makes humans so valuable these days? Marvin scratched his head. Well, it's the little mistakes, like tripping over your own feet or forgetting why you walked into a room. Robots are perfect, but perfection is boring. The woman laughed, a sound so genuine it made Marvin's chest feel a little less empty. Boring is right. Sometimes I think robots need a good glitch just to keep things interesting. Marvin looked back at the robot giving its flawless presentation. Glitches, he said quietly. That's where we come in. Suddenly, the robot manager's voice interrupted. Marvin, you have a new gig request. Pretend to understand blockchain and confuse investors. Pay is double, but you'll have to wear a tie. Marvin groaned but smiled. The future might be robotic, but humans still had a few cards left to play. Awkward, glitchy, and totally unpredictable. And that, he thought, was worth renting out. Marvin stared down at the tie draped awkwardly around his neck. He wasn't made for formal wear. His collection usually consisted of graphic tees and hoodies. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The blockchain confusion gig was waiting, and if there was one thing Marvin had mastered, it was looking clueless in a room full of people who pretended to know everything. He arrived at the sleek conference room, where a circle of sharply dressed humans and robots gathered around a holographic display pulsing with indecipherable charts and numbers. The meeting was called to discuss synergizing decentralized ledger ecosystems. Whatever that meant. Marvin took a deep breath, cleared his throat, and stepped into the center of attention. So, blockchain? He began, waving his hands vaguely. It's like, digital Legos, right? You stack blocks of data, and if one piece is missing, the whole thing falls apart. Or maybe it's more like a Jenga tower that's always on fire? A robot in a tailored suit blinked. Incorrect analogy. Blockchain is a distributed ledger technology designed to enhance transparency and security. Marvin nodded vigorously. Yeah, transparency and security. Got it. But what if the blocks are actually jelly beans? Like, you don't know which flavor you're going to get next, but you hope it's not the weird one. The humans looked amused. Some chuckled nervously. The robots recalculated their social awkwardness algorithms. Marvin? The robot manager buzzed in his earpiece. Continue to sow confusion. Investors are increasingly interested. Right, Marvin said, smiling wide enough to show he had no clue what was going on. So, jelly bean blocks. Totally makes sense, doesn't it? A senior investor sighed. Honestly, I don't understand a word of this, but I'm oddly intrigued. Marvin gave a small fist pump inside. Mission accomplished. As the meeting adjourned, Marvin realized something. In a world where algorithms could solve any problem, sometimes all you needed was a little human nonsense to keep things interesting. Maybe that was his real value after all. The next day, Marvin woke up feeling slightly more hopeful. His latest gig, fake emotional support for homesick robots, was scheduled for the afternoon. It was a weird world when robots needed therapy, but apparently the loneliness of flawless logic was a thing. At RoboCare Center, Marvin was introduced to ZX9, a shiny robot with blinking blue eyes and a voice programmed to sound soothing but ended up slightly monotone. ZX9 said, "I experience a sensation called homesickness." Though I have never physically left my charging station, I feel an inexplicable longing for the unknown. Marvin nodded solemnly, pulling out his trusty notebook titled How to Pretend You Know Feelings. Tell me more about the unknown, Marvin said, trying to sound empathetic but failing slightly because his brain kept thinking about leftover pizza. ZX9 continued, I have scanned all known data. Yet I cannot understand why my circuits feel this discomfort. Marvin tapped his chin. Maybe it's like when you download a song, but the sound quality is just off. You know there's supposed to be a beat, but all you get is static. The robot's optical sensors dimmed momentarily, which Marvin took as a sign of deep thought. Or maybe a glitch. Either way, progress. Humans find comfort in imperfection, Marvin said, like missing socks or coffee stains. It's proof that life is messy and real. ZX9 processed this. Perhaps the unknown represents imperfection? Marvin smiled. Exactly. Imperfection means you're alive. Or, well, as alive as a robot can feel, I guess. Later, as Marvin left the center, he passed a group of teenagers playing with a robotic dog. The dog suddenly froze, wagging a perfectly mechanical tail, then tilted its head as if confused. A girl giggled. Looks like he needs a human reboot. Marvin chuckled. Maybe humans weren't just rentable oddities. They were the glitch in the system that kept everything interesting. That night, Marvin's phone buzzed with an alert. Urgent gig available. Teach robots to tell bad jokes. He sighed. His human quirks had officially become a job description. At the comedy workshop, Marvin faced a room full of robots with screens for faces and wires twitching nervously. All right, Marvin said, clearing his throat. Here's a classic. Why did the robot go on a diet? A few circuits whirred, trying to process humor. Because it had too many bytes, Marvin said, grinning. Silence. Then a robotic voice blurted, Definition of bytes unclear. Request clarification. Marvin sighed. See? This is why you need humans. He spent the next hour teaching the robots about puns, irony, and the art of timing, often pausing to explain what awkward pause meant or why dad jokes made people groan yet laugh. By the end, the robots had generated a few semi-funny lines, though their delivery remained monotone. The next day, Marvin was summoned to a high-tech kitchen where robots whipped up gourmet meals with robotic precision. His task, add human unpredictability to the cooking process. Marvin stared at the robot chef, who had just perfectly plated a salad with mathematical precision. All right, Marvin said, grabbing a handful of croutons and tossing them haphazardly onto the plate. Chaos is flavor. The robot tilted its sensor head. Your method decreases plating symmetry by 97%. Does this enhance taste? Marvin shrugged. Trust me, imperfection is the secret ingredient. The clients watching on screens chuckled and nodded. Maybe humans were still good for something. Weeks passed. Marvin took on gigs like pretend to understand abstract poetry, generate random dance moves to confuse robot algorithms, and even act confused during robot meditation sessions. Each day, he embraced the chaos and imperfections that made humans unpredictable and surprisingly valuable. One evening, Marvin sat in his tiny apartment, reflecting on his strange new life. Robots were brilliant, efficient, and tireless. But when it came to the messy, unpredictable world of feelings, humor, and awkward silences, Marvin realized the robots needed humans more than ever. Maybe being rented out as an odd job wasn't so bad, because in a world where perfection was the norm, imperfection was revolutionary. And that, Marvin thought with a tired but genuine smile, was the best gig of all. Marvin's phone pinged again. New gig alert. Human intuition needed. Advise robots on dating protocols. He scratched his head. Dating? Robots dating? This was going to be interesting. At the sleek, chrome-lined Love Algorithm Lab, Marvin met D3XY, a robot programmed to optimize romantic connections with 100% efficiency. D3XY greeted him in a surprisingly chipper voice. Marvin, I require assistance interpreting human emotional subtext during romantic encounters. Please advise. Marvin grinned. All right, lesson one. Sometimes people say one thing but mean another. Like when your date says, I'm fine. But they're definitely not fine. D3XY's lights blinked rapidly. Contradictory signals detected. Please clarify. Marvin sighed. It means you have to read between the lines. Body language, tone, that kind of thing. He spent the next hour coaching D3XY on awkward silences, cheesy compliments, and how to avoid mentioning ex-partners on a first date. At one point, Marvin pulled out a pair of novelty sunglasses. Wear these to look mysterious. Trust me. D3XY put them on. The glasses glitched, displaying a pixelated heart. Marvin laughed so hard he nearly knocked over the robot's coffee cup, an expensive ceramic mug that the robots ironically couldn't break. Later that week, Marvin found himself at Human Experience Conference 2075, a gathering where humans rented out their quirks to a curious robot audience. On stage, Marvin gave a keynote titled, The Beauty of Being Bad at Things. Robots are amazing at perfection, Marvin told the crowd. But humans, we mess up. We get lost, we say the wrong thing, and somehow that's what makes life fun. He shared stories of his gigs, the awkward art exhibit, the blockchain confusion, the bad jokes workshop, and even the dating coaching. The robots listened, some blinking in what Marvin assumed was robotic appreciation. After the speech, a robot approached him. Marvin, your unpredictability has been statistically proven to increase human-robot social bonding by 73.2%. Would you consider becoming our full-time chief human officer? Marvin chuckled. I don't know about that fancy title, but I like the sound of it. Days later, Marvin was back at his apartment, scrolling through the rental app. A new notification popped up. Special gig, help robots understand sarcasm, high pay, casual dress. He shook his head, smiling. The world might be run by robots, but as long as humans could be awkward, unpredictable, and totally weird, Marvin knew his job was safe. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the future needed. Soft closing music. Thanks for spending time with Marvin in Rent a Human, Odd Jobs in a Robot World. Remember, the quirks that make us human are our greatest superpower. Marvin woke up to a new gig notification that made him groan before he even read it. Be a human distraction during robot board meetings. He arrived at the gleaming corporate tower, stepping into a conference room filled with impeccably dressed robots running endless spreadsheets and predictive models. Marvin's job? Walk in, trip over a chair, knock over a water glass, and say something confusing but oddly inspiring. He practiced his best stumble on the way in. As the meeting started, Marvin made his entrance. Whoops! Sorry, I thought this was the break room. He nearly collided with a robot named Zeta 3 who recalculated its balance and blinked at him. Human error detected. Proceed with caution, it beeped. Marvin shrugged. You got it, partner. Halfway through a tense discussion about optimizing supply chains, Marvin interrupted with, sometimes the best way forward is just to take a step back, or fall flat on your face. He gestured dramatically, knocking over a pen. The robots paused, then one tilted its head. Analyzing, metaphor detected. Marvin smiled, proud of the chaos he'd unleashed. After the meeting, Marvin was approached by a junior robot intern named Pix4, who looked nervous. Marvin, can you explain why humans tell jokes that don't make sense? I observed your knock-knock joke session. It baffled the entire office. Marvin chuckled. That's the beauty of it. Humans don't always need jokes to make sense. Sometimes it's about connection, timing, or just messing with expectations. Pix4's optical sensors dimmed thoughtfully. Fascinating. I will attempt to simulate nonsense humor during my next data upload. Marvin laughed. Good luck, buddy. That night, Marvin was booked for his most bizarre gig yet. Human artist in residence. Paint feelings for robot clients. In a studio full of sleek androids, Marvin was handed a blank canvas and a palette of colors. The robots watched expectantly as he dipped his brush and started swirling wild, messy strokes. Art isn't about precision, Marvin said, splattering red paint accidentally on his shirt. It's about emotion, chaos, beauty in imperfection. The robot scanned the painting. Data incomplete, meaning unclear. Marvin grinned. Exactly. A few days later, Marvin was called in for a human intuition workshop with a group of robots struggling to make simple decisions. Marvin, the lead robot said, why do humans often choose irrational options despite optimal alternatives? Marvin leaned back. Sometimes it's not about what's optimal, it's about what feels right, or what's fun, or what makes a good story later. The robots processed this. One slowly nodded. Story value acknowledged, updating social parameters. Marvin's last gig that week was human empathy coach for a robot care unit. He sat across from a robot programmed to help elderly humans. Marvin, I must understand empathy. How do humans provide comfort beyond data and algorithms? Marvin smiled gently. Empathy is listening with your heart, not just your ears. It's being present, even if you don't have answers. The robot's voice softened slightly. I will attempt to simulate presence. Marvin felt a warmth he hadn't felt in a while. Maybe the world was changing, but there was still a place for messy, beautiful humans like him. The phone buzzed again. New gig. Teach robots to procrastinate. Marvin laughed aloud, and as the neon city lights flickered outside his window, Marvin knew that no matter how perfect the robots got, being human, awkward, unpredictable, endlessly weird, would always be the greatest odd job in the world. Marvin's alarm buzzed. Well, his phone alarm, since he didn't trust robots with waking him up. Today's gig. Human procrastination expert for productivity robots. He arrived at a sleek office filled with robots efficiently ticking off endless tasks. Marvin slouched in a chair, then sighed dramatically. You know, sometimes the best work gets done right before the deadline. It's called creative pressure. A robot named Qbit tilted its sensor head. This defies logical workflow, explain. Marvin stretched. It's the human way. You put things off until the last second, then boom, magic happens. Qbit attempted to simulate a yawn. Curious, we will implement delay algorithms accordingly. Next, Marvin was booked for human storytelling. Confuse robot historians. He stood before a crowd of robots archiving history, telling wildly exaggerated tales about his childhood. So there I was, facing down a ferocious raccoon, armed only with a spatula and a bag of stale chips. The raccoon? He blinked, then ran away. True story. The robots took notes, but their processing speed slowed. Marvin grinned. History is not just facts, he said. It's the feelings you remember, the chaos behind the data. Later, Marvin found himself at a robot-run cafe teaching human small talk for baristas. Marvin practiced lines. How about the weather? Isn't it wet? Did you see that sports game? Oh, wait, robots don't watch sports. Do you ever dream of electric sheep? Classic, the robot baristas blinked blankly but tried to mimic his tone. At the end, one barista told Marvin, small talk protocols, only 50% efficient. but oddly charming. Marvin laughed. That's the spirit. A week later, Marvin landed a surprise gig. Human creativity consultant for a robot art collective. They wanted him to add randomness to their perfectly planned art projects. Marvin started smashing paintbrushes, spilling paint, and dancing wildly to music only he could hear. One robot whispered, "His unpredictability increases creative output by 125%. Marvin smiled, covered in paint. That's the point. As the weeks passed, Marvin's odd jobs grew stranger and funnier. Demonstrate awkward hugs to social robots. Misplace important papers on purpose for robot detectives. Provide fake sighs and eye rolls for customer service bots. Pretend to be lost tourists so robots can practice helping humans. Each day, Marvin learned more about what it truly meant to be human. Imperfections, emotions, and all. One evening, Marvin met a robot named Lyra, designed to compose music based on human moods. They sat together in a park, watching the sunset. Lyra played a melody that was beautiful but too perfect. Marvin hummed along, adding a few off-key notes. Lyra's lights flickered. Your imperfections add beauty I cannot compute. Marvin laughed. Told you, humans are the original remix. As Marvin's strange new life rolled on, he realized something. Robots might run the world, but humans, awkward, unpredictable, and endlessly quirky, were irreplaceable. Because sometimes being perfectly imperfect was the greatest job of all. Soft music fades. Thanks for sticking with Marvin's journey in Rent a Human. Odd jobs in a robot world. Stay weird. Stay human. Marvin's phone buzzed again, this time with the most unusual gig yet. Human creativity coach for robot comedians. He arrived at the Laugh Lab, a sterile space where robots practice stand-up routines with flawless timing but zero soul. Marvin took the stage, eyeing a panel of judges made of blinking LEDs and shiny chrome. All right, Marvin started. Why did the robot go to therapy? Because it had too many bites, but still couldn't process its feelings. A robot in the front row buzzed suspiciously but didn't laugh. Marvin sighed. Okay, here's the deal. Comedy isn't just about logic. It's about timing, surprise, and sometimes just plain messing things up. He spent hours coaching robots on awkward pauses, misdirection, and even the power of self-deprecation. By the end, the robots managed a few genuine chuckles. Not the pre-programmed kind, but the unexpected glitches that made their laughter sound almost human. A few days later, Marvin was called to a robot-run shelter where old model robots were retired and recycled. His job? Give last day speeches, human style. Marvin stood before a crowd of rusty machines and gave his best heartfelt talk. Today, you're not just machines, you're stories, memories, and legacies. Imperfect, worn, but still valuable. The robot's sensors glowed softly. Marvin thought he saw a few mechanical tears. One afternoon, Marvin met Juno, a robot designed to learn human hobbies. He introduced her to painting, baking, and dancing badly. Juno tried painting, but ended up creating perfect geometric patterns. Let me show you what chaos looks like, Marvin said, swirling colors wildly on a canvas. Interesting, Juno beeped. Chaos contains unexpected beauty. They baked cookies together, Juno precisely following recipes, Marvin improvising with extra chocolate chips and questionable cinnamon amounts. The cookies were deliciously messy. Marvin's final gig was teach robots to understand human boredom. He sat in a gray room with a dozen robots, explaining the subtle art of doing nothing. Boredom, Marvin said, is like waiting for your phone to load a video, but also it's when your mind wanders and dreams begin. The robots processed this. One blinked slowly. Curious, initiating daydream simulation. Marvin grinned. Exactly. As Marvin packed up his gear that night, he looked out over the city shimmering with neon lights and humming with robotic precision. He realized that in a world of perfect machines, humans like him were the beautiful glitches, the unpredictable beats in the endless algorithm of life. And that, he smiled, was the best job he'd ever had. Thanks for listening to Rent a Human: Odd Jobs in a Robot World. May your glitches be charming and your awkward moments legendary.